Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is part 3 of my watercolor art materials series. I already talked to you about my paints and my paper, and this video is all about my brushes. So first, a quick disclaimer: just as with paint, with paper, I am simply sharing what works for me for painting watercolor landscapes in a loose style. I don't have extensive experience with many brands or types of brushes, and these are not the rules or the shoulds, as we all have our own preferences and unique tastes and styles. So as I mentioned in part 1 of my watercolor art material series, in the hierarchy of my art supplies, high quality paint comes first, then paper, and then brushes. So the brushes are at the bottom of my materials pyramid. They are obviously still very important, but I do not invest as much in my brushes as I do in paint, paper, and sketchbooks. I have been painting for quite a while now, on and off, but much more consistently in the last 5 or so years. So I have collected quite a few brushes along the way. And I think if you look after your brushes, they last forever, at least in my experience. And I have some brushes that are over 15 years old and they're still going strong. The majority of my brushes are synthetics, and I do have a few natural hair brushes too. They're mostly squirrel, the natural hair ones. I don't have any high-end brushes like Kolinsky Sable, for example. I've never tried painting with one, so maybe I don't know what I'm missing, as I am aware that they are traditionally considered the best brushes for watercolor painting. But I think I've managed quite well by choosing the much more easily accessible synthetics. So let me tell you what I'm looking for in a brush when I'm adding a brush to my collection. First, a longer belly, as it holds more water and more paint. Also helps create more expressive marks. Second, not too much flop, and also I don't really like very stiff brushes, so a brush has to have just the right amount of softness plus still some snap to it. Third, I love unusually shaped brushes, ones that you can make interesting marks with, and I will talk about these later in the video. Also, I like brushes that come to a very fine point, as first it makes a brush more versatile. You can create both large marks and then very thin lines with the same brush. And also these fine points helps with those expressive brush marks that I always try to make when I paint, to make the painting more interesting. I also look for brushes that feel good in my hand. I find that some handles are heavier than others, so I'm looking for a brush that feels nice to hold, as it makes the painting experience more enjoyable. Talking about my collection of brushes, I would split them into two categories. My workhorse brushes are ones that are very versatile, so they can be used for a great variety of watercolor jobs, from larger washes to smaller marks. And the brushes are used for a particular purpose, like adding thin lines, creating some specific marks on paper, like foliage. When I paint trees, lifting paint, adding tiny details, making splatters, or painting a particular subject. Like this dagger brush by Princeton Neptune, for example, I only use it for painting fir trees because I haven't really found any other use for it. Just as I mentioned with paint and the paper, I think it is important to get to know your materials, your brushes here, very well. So when you get a new brush, try painting a great variety of subjects with it to see what it's capable of. And generally, I try to use what I already have before adding another brush to my collection. But I also like exploring what other brushes are out there, because finding a new exciting brush that can make some really fun marks often inspires me to try new things, and that always leads to some fresh energy in my work, and fresh energy is great for creative growth. Now let's talk in more detail about these brushes that I have. First, these are my all-purpose brushes, ones that I use for the majority of my work. ones that I always start my paintings with. And most of them, as you can see, are mops. I always start my paintings with the largest brush I'm comfortable with for that paper size, as it helps me stay loose and also to establish large shapes quickly. And then I pick up smaller brushes when I start adding details. And smaller brushes give me more control over brush marks. So I leave that till later, and then larger brushes help me not to get lost in the details. So that's very important for me in the initial stage of every painting. This brush, the long round size 12 by Princeton Aqua Elite, is currently my most used one. If you have been watching this channel for a while, you have probably noticed that in the last 7 or so months, I have been using this in pretty much every single video. So I think they are marketed as synthetic Kolinsky. I got it in February. I have used it for literally every landscape I have painted since then. It has a longer belly, just the right amount of firmness and snappiness, but it is still quite flexible. And with all that use in the last 7 months, it is only just starting to lose its fine points. So I think it will last me a long while still, and it still has a very nice points, just not as hair thin as it used to be when I just got it. The only thing I wish they made long rounds in different sizes, as they are currently only available in size 8 and size 12. But a larger long round brush like this one would be very helpful for larger paintings, because this one is still relatively small. So before I added Princeton Aqua Elite to my toolbox, these Thomas W. Schaller signature brushes by an Australian brand, NEEF, were my most used ones. And I still use them quite a lot, especially for larger paintings, because see the size difference. So these are synthetic squirrel mops, and they have a longer belly compared to other mops. And the longer belly is what I'm looking for in my brushes, as I've mentioned. So when they first came out, I tried one and I loved it. So I added more sizes to my brush collection. So I have 4. I think they also come in larger sizes. So I have size 3/0, size 0, size 2, and size 4. I also really like these long mops. These are series 490 by Da Vinci Casaneo. Da Vinci Casaneo brushes are amazing. I think they are quite easily available everywhere. They are synthetic squirrel, so they are quite soft. I wish they came in more sizes. Currently, they're only available in size 0 and size 2. I wish they made size 4 at least, because I really like the flexibility they have, and also the way they feel in your hand, and also the marks they make. Before I got all these brushes that I have just mentioned, I used Da Vinci Casaneo mops series 498. They are really good, but once I tried longer mops, I couldn't go back to these ones, as their belly felt too short and too stubby, and I wasn't able to make those expressive marks that longer mops are capable of. So if we compare size 2 long mop and size 2 regular mop, you can see the difference in the length of the belly. So this one is definitely capable of really interesting marks. And this one is just way too short for me. So I hardly ever pick them up these days, these brushes. But they are good, but I like these ones better. Plus, they don't come to a very fine point now. When I first got them, they used to have a very fine point, but I noticed that they lost their fine points quite quickly, I think just after a few weeks, to be honest. And these are the brushes that I use for specific purposes only. So I have liners for adding details like tree branches, grass. I use Princeton Select. They are more on the budget side, but they have worked well. So they do not really hold much paint, but it hasn't bothered me. I also really like this soft rigger by Roy Mark. It's a synthetic one, size 2. I got it forever ago, and it's great for painting tree branches because it is quite soft, so you can make organic looking shapes with it. These are more on the stiffer side. These are just a few tiny detail brushes by NEEF and by Pen Arts Global. This oval wash, it's a squirrel hair one, so it's quite soft, by Art Basics, is fantastic for making washes. I use it when I paint quite large. That's why you probably never really see me use it in my videos, because I paint small for my videos. It holds a ton of paint, makes great marks. I have had it for probably around 15 years. It's in a fantastic shape. I find rigger brushes quite useful. So this one, Black Silver by Dynasty, it was just a very cheap brush I picked up somewhere. I use it for splattering paints pretty much exclusively. It is quite snappy. Floppy brushes, when you do the splatters, they tend to throw the paint around and you never know where the splatters will go. But with this one, I definitely have more control over where I send them, just because this is a stiffer brush. So I recently discovered this very old Pure Sable brush. So this is probably not a Kolinsky Sable, this is a different Sable. It's not a very good brush. I got it a very long time ago, so I completely forgot I had it. And I found it recently, and I figured out that it actually releases the paint and the water really easily. So I have been using it for larger splatters, because some brushes, when you load them with paint, they actually hold onto it. They do not really release it very easily, and this one lets go of it. So when you do the splattering, I like the effects that this one creates. So the dagger brush, it's very soft, very floppy. I use it for painting fir trees only. As I mentioned, it's great. I haven't really found any other use for it for my landscapes, but it's fun to paint with, so I really like the shape. Now, flats. I use them for painting a sharp horizon line. I also sometimes start my paintings with them instead of my usual mops, just to bring some fresh energy to my work. This flat is used quite often though, but for lifting paint only. It's a stiff synthetic, so it lifts the paint off the paper quite easily. So you probably have seen me use it quite a bit in my videos, because softer brushes do not do a very good job of lifting paint, but stiffer brushes do. Now, needle points. I get a ton of questions about these brushes just because their shape is so unusual. I use them for painting trees mostly, as they make lovely marks, lovely organic marks on paper. These are Alvaro Castanet signature brushes by NEEF, again easily found in Australia. I have seen brushes of a similar shape on Jackson's Art website. They are sometimes called reservoir brushes or liner brushes, depending on the brand, and they are a ton of fun. So if you can get your hands on one, I would highly recommend having a brush of this shape in your collection. I use the smaller one more often than this one, just because I normally paint quite small. They are squirrel, so they are quite soft. I used this one yesterday actually for painting the tree crown for these gum trees. These are the food brushes by Princeton Select. I love them for painting foliage because of the marks they make. I have used them in my videos quite a few times, so you might have seen me use them. I think they are very fun. Hakes. These goat hair brushes are great for blending paint on paper. And I love using them dry because I can blend the colors on the wet paper without adding any more water to the wash and diluting the paint. And so they are especially good for painting dramatic skies. Also, it's nice to have old frame brushes that you are not precious about. They are great for making interesting marks as well, because I can do this and not worry. These synthetic rounds never come to a point anymore, so even when they're wet, they just do not do a good job at all, and this one just stays in this shape, in this frayed shape. So I embraced it and I used them to make really chaotic brush marks, for example, for foliage or grass. Keep it in mind that some brushes that you see people use might not work for you. And I have a few brushes like that. So the first example, this Princeton Heritage round size 10. I got it a few years back when I was just coming back to watercolor, and I saw many people use it online and rave about it. And I think at some point this brush was even hard to find because everyone wanted one. I actually hardly ever used it as it just doesn't do anything for me. Have never found a use for it, really tried. I still pick it up occasionally, but for some reason it doesn't inspire me, so I'm not a big fan. Here are a few more that I have added to my brush collection but never really found a use for. So this massive Princeton Neptune size 8 mop is just too big, too round. I don't really like the way it holds on to water and paint. So I bought it, never really used it after a couple of tries. Now, round brushes by Princeton Neptune, they do not come to a fine point. I don't like the marks they make. I do use the smaller one for adding the sun or the moon in white gouache. And also this Da Vinci Spin Synthetic Mop, I picked it up because I really liked how long it is, but it is very stiff and springy, and also it doesn't release the paint in a nice way for me. So again, got it, never used it. I will still keep all these brushes because who knows, maybe I will still find the use for them at some point, because as we keep painting, our skills and our style keep developing. So maybe one day I will actually start using this. So just a quick note on how I look after my brushes. I keep them stored upright on my desk. I don't wash them with any brush, soap or anything, but I do rinse them out well after applying the paint. And I made it a habit to rinse out the brushes very well straight after I use them, so I don't get any surprises when I start a new painting. And the brush that I grab still has some leftover paint on it, and I end up with a green sky, but it still happens from time to time. So these are my brushes, and I'm curious what your favorite brushes are. Feel free to share your experience with different types and brands of brushes in the comments. Thank you for watching, and happy painting!